Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You have what amounts to a failed uprising in Venezuela behind you, and yet your movement continues to make incredibly optimistic predictions about unseating the government. Why is that?
Because the situation is unsustainable. We have 18.7 million Venezuelans who have lost 25 pounds over the last year. That's the beginning of a major famine.
You've been saying it's unsustainable for the last 2 years.
Huh?
You've been saying it's unsustainable for the last 2 years.
It becomes increasingly unsustainable.
You said the other day that in 2 weeks' time, the lights were going out in Venezuela. Here we are, 2 weeks on, the lights are still there, and President Maduro is still in his palace, isn't he, with his armed forces?
Well, with some of his armed forces. I mean, the head of his intelligence agency is now safely ensconced in the...
that's one.
Okay.
Yeah. They've got plenty more, haven't they?
No, not really. I mean, they are negotiating behind his back. There are negotiations going on right now, and they are looking to get out. And the situation is just unsustainable. The gasoline will run out in the next 2 to 3 years.
What's the evidence for that? I mean, in the last few days, we had Juan Guaido insisting that he had the backing of 80 to 85% of the Venezuelan military. Based on what?
Based on the fact that they are suffering as well. They are going home to wives who tell them that their work is a humiliation, to children that are crying and hungry. 80 to 85% of the military are the worker bees of the military. They are not reaping the $8.8 billion of drug trafficking and gold trafficking.
But there's nothing to say that they are on your side. Nothing to say that.
Yes, there's absolutely to say on their side.
You failed to bring the military onto your side.
No, on the contrary. The problem is that we have Cuban intelligence officers preventing them and following their children and preventing them from rising up. And we have over 200 military being tortured. There have been over 12 before Juan Guaido. Excuse me, before Juan Guaido took office, there were over 12 military uprising attempts by the military. Spontaneously.
Your latest attempt, though, was described by the crisis group as poorly conceived and easily subdued. That's hardly a success, is it?
The point is that people want change. Guaido is
They may want change, they may not necessarily want you.
I'm not the one who's in office.
Your movement, Juan Guaido.
I'm an ambassador for the movement. Look, I think that they want out from this drug cartel regime that tortures people. It is causing a bigger exodus than Syria. This is not, it violates its own constitution.
It's not a big exodus than Syria. Syria is at least 12 million people. We take into account those who've been...
What 12 million people? It's about 5 million people have left. So we will be at over 5 people.
I'm talking about internally displaced.
Well, we will have 5.4 million by the end of the year, and 8.4 million by the end of next year. That far outstrips Syria, and that's according to the UNHCR.
That's another prediction.
That's according to the UNHCR and the OAS. The UNHCR isn't exactly, a bastion of right-wingness, now is it?
Apparently, your biggest mistake last month was to trust the word of the government officials you were talking to.
Yes, correct. They're liars, because they're drug traffickers, human rights abusers.
Well, you knew that anyway, so why is it such a big surprise that you were played by them? Why?
Why? Because
they took you for fools, didn't they?
Well, I don't know if they took us for fools. I mean, we hoped that the positioning of come in defense of the people, come in defense of the Constitution, and accept amnesty and be part of the right side of history would appeal to them. Unfortunately, I think that we rather underestimated that the people behind this, and I was not personally involved. I'm an ambassador. I am not the president. The chain of command flows down to me, not upwards. The people who were behind this and took the decisions, I think, were perhaps a bit naive about the amount of money being made by the military and their drug trafficking activities. There's another psychological component, which you will know well from game theory, for instance, is when you're trying to negotiate a situation, you have all these different players, and what you know, but you don't know what the other person knows about what you know. So basically, we suspect
Let's just stay with the facts and not the game theory. Let's just stay with the facts and not the game theory, okay?
No, because because this is a competitive negotiating situation.
You made a number of important mistakes, but the people who pay for those mistakes are the people, aren't they?
No.
According to the UN, in just 8 days, from January the 21st to the 29th, when the protest began, more than 1,000 people were arbitrarily detained. Many of them were just kids. Most of them were kept incommunicado for days without access to family or legal representation.
So you think that leaving them there to continue to starve? We have 330,000 Venezuelans have been murdered by government-sponsored gangs.
To put their lives at risk.
330,000 have been murdered by government-sponsored gangs. 7 million will die shortly.
And the best you could do was a poorly conceived and easily subdued. Poorly conceived and easily subdued.
What are you recommending? Military? Are you advocating a military intervention?
I'm not here to answer your questions. You did agree to come here and answer mine.
What are you suggesting?
I'm asking you, where's your red line here? At what point do you stop urging the people to come out because you're putting more lives in danger?
What are the other options then? What do you recommend? That attempt, what happened on April 30th and May 1st, is in keeping with the Constitution that was drafted by Hugo Chavez. And I encourage you to read it.
And it didn't work. Why should people trust you now? Why should people come out on the streets now?
Because now they know. Because now they know how the regime is fractured. That Diosdado Cabello and Padrino Lopez and Tarek El Aissami now has an arrest warrant. He is the Hezbollah bagman.
They also know that you played your best hand and lost.
No, why is it the best hand and lost?
That's what the crisis group says. You played your best hand. Carlos Romero.
So is that the only view?
Carlos Romero, the commentator.
International Crisis Group.
No, commentator Carlos Romero described Venezuelan politics now as shaken. He said the people were confused, wounded, and unmotivated. That's the result of what you've done.
As a result of what we have done, rather than 20 years of dictatorship and starvation and torture. I'm sorry to say.
You gave them hope, and the hope was dashed, wasn't it?
No, and we stand firm, despite the fact that since then, 28% of the National Assembly has been arrested, and our vice president is now disappeared in the classic Latin American sense of the term, as in taken with no proof of life given.
And Mr. Guaido insisted in the last few days that
we will stand firm for the rights of all people, no matter what.
Can I just ask the question?
Sure.
He has insisted in the last few days that there is absolute unity in the opposition. That's pretty hard to believe, isn't it?
What do you mean?
The Washington Post reported on May the 5th that some of the opposition's senior leaders have begun playing the blame game over what went wrong. So it's unlikely that your unity is solid, isn't it?
When the persecution is absolutely across all political parties. The National Assembly members that have been now exiled since May 1st or have been disappeared are across all political parties.
How can there not be unity?
With them
the opposition in Venezuela has been critically divided for years. Critically divided for years.
No, I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, Tim. What has happened is this. After many years of the international community blaming us, saying, oh, you can't get your act together and you need to unify, we have unified. We have a president, according to our constitution, called Juan Guaido. Every single party is behind him. My appointment, for instance, was approved by every single political party in the National Assembly. With unanimity. Hang on. Ironically, what has happened is now that we are unified, the international community has fractured. Now you have the Montevideo Initiative, the International Contact Group, the Lima Group, conversations in Havana, and conversations now all over the place. And the irony is that that's the ultimate hypocrisy, is that the international community behaves like a bunch of squabbling children at the time when we have our act together.
And since when?
And that is a betrayal of my people.
Since when have you discovered this newfound unity? Because by November last year, the fights were so bad. By November last year, the fights were so bad that Luis Salamanca, political scientist, former director of the National Electoral Council, said
I'll tell you exactly
the opposition is virtually destroyed.
January 10th, 2019 is when we found the unity.
When they suddenly came together, really?
Yes, of course, under Juan Guaido, when he became the de facto president of Venezuela, because Maduro is in violation of our constitution. We unified behind our constitution.
And not everybody seemed very happy at the way he took the presidency.
What do you mean? Yes, they did.
Enrique Capriles, one of the most visible
with joy.
Enrique Capriles, one of the most visible opposition figures, said in February, when Guaido took possession of the assembly, the view of the majority of the Venezuelan opposition was that he ought not to be appointed president. The 23rd of January came and he appointed himself.
Has been sidelined in Venezuelan politics for some time.
Can I just finish?
Sure.
The 23rd of January came and he appointed himself. We didn't have any information. It surprised many leaders in the opposition.
Enrique Capriles has been sidelined from Venezuelan politics for a long time for good reason. He's a two-time loser presidential candidate. And he does not have the support of the Venezuelan people. Juan Guaido.
Oh, so his views are automatically to be dismissed because they don't coincide with yours.
No, they don't coincide with the will of the Venezuelan people who want out from this regime. He is not the leader of a political party. He is not even really involved in the political party anymore. And he fled the country and came in under dubious circumstances. I mean, if that's the one person you choose when you have millions of people weeping in the streets for Guaido, and he exited the country, and you can see him when he went on the tour, you know, the diaspora in Argentina.
And look at the results. Maduro is still in the presidential palace, and you people are trying to find protection in foreign embassies and being arrested.
He's in the presidential palace because the Russian military, the international left, thinks that it's perfectly fine, okay, for the Russians to invade us, basically, and have military advisors.
Let's talk about the military.
And have military advisors in Cuban intelligence
Let's
agents.
talk about the military.
And Hezbollah and ELN. The ELN, a foreign terrorist organization, personally intimidated. Hang on.
Can we just keep this?
Hang on, and stopped the uprising, marched the houses the same way the Nazis did.
Vanessa Neumann, we don't need speeches. I want to talk about the military. Okay. I want to talk about the fact that it was reported that Juan Guaido said he would probably accept a U.S. military intervention if the United States proposed it. You have been talking to the U.S. military. Your movement has been talking to the U.S. military.
My counterpart in
about
Washington, D.C.
strategic and operational planning.
No. Let me correct you there, factually. My counterpart in Washington, D.C., Carlos Vecchio, will speak to them on Monday. That conversation has not happened yet.
So you're pretty serious about this military intervention by the United States?
I'm not serious.
Really?
We have a commander-in-chief. Our president, that is his decision to make.
He says he's already been talking about strategic and operational planning with the head of the U.S. Southern Command.
He ordered Carlos Vecchio to have that conversation, and that conversation has been scheduled and announced on Twitter by Carlos Vecchio, my counterpart in Washington, D.C., for Monday.
Such a move would also split the international community. Again, you say it's so split anyway. So you're not bothered about that. The European Union says it doesn't want military intervention. The Lima Group says it doesn't want military intervention. You don't care what they think about this?
Oh, we are looking at all the options. We're also involved in conversations and negotiations to find a peaceful solution, a peaceful resolution. The offer is now, and has always been on the table, for them to leave the country peacefully on a plane, get out, take their ill-gotten gains, take their ill-gotten $500 to $800 billion that they have stolen, okay? Take some portion of that and leave, and let us to get back to democracy, and let the 85 to 90% of people in Venezuela who want Maduro out to carry on with their lives.
Let me just be clear about this.
Many options.
About this. You say they can get on a plane, get out of the country.
Yes.
So no justice and no accountability.
For
these people who have been murdering and torturing, they just got off scot-free. How forgiving do you think the Venezuelan people are?
That
should be, after what you say has been done to them.
Well,
the murdering, the torturing.
Well, that is something that will be taken up and
Where? If they get on a plane and go
You can download the document.
Where?
You can download the document. It's called Plan País. And it's in there. We have a plan for transitional justice. It's in our governance plan for transitional justice and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which happens after you have regime change. And you know this, because we've done this. This has happened a number of times before. So we will follow the international standard on this.
Really? The fact is these offers of amnesty may well be illegal under international law, might well run counter to Venezuela's international obligations. In January, Human Rights Watch called on you to amend your amnesty bill, saying that any amnesty guaranteeing impunity by absolving government and military officials of the most serious human rights violations is incompatible with Venezuela's international obligations.
That's correct. Our ambassador to Czechoslovakia is actually the one who brought the case to the ICC. She's a major human rights lawyer, Tamara Suhu.
So you don't have the right to offer these amnesties,
well, we can't,
blanket amnesties.
It depends on we will take direction from the International Criminal Court on how on crimes against humanity. People who commit crimes against humanity is a very different case and go into a different basket than people who are guilty of money laundering, drug trafficking,
I'm not talking about money laundering. I'm talking about people who murder, who torture, who take part in enforced disappearances. You're saying let the whole lot you're saying let the whole lot get out and
No, we are saying we will.
You didn't distinguish when you offered these amnesties.
Again, your facts are wrong.
Really?
Yes. Your facts are wrong.
So
and our president,
who distinguished?
Our president has distinguished that. He has clearly stated, he has stated it at least 20 times, Tim, that anybody who is not guilty of crimes against humanity can be offered amnesty. Those who are guilty of crimes against humanity do not get amnesty. Period. And that's in keeping with international law. So I'm not sure where you're getting your facts. It's about the third or fourth time in this interview you're wrong.
So why, if I'm so wrong, why have all the human rights organizations got onto your case and said that this is something you shouldn't be doing?
I can't speak for what's in their minds. I can only speak to the fact that they're wrong.
They didn't hear these quotes either.
I don't know, but I think you can go online and find them, even this week.
What's extraordinary also is that not only are you offering amnesty to some of the military and government personnel, but you apparently offered to give them a place in a transitional government. Let's think about that for a moment. Just
that has happened. That happens a lot.
How forgiving do you think Venezuelans will be?
That is something that will be in consultation with the Venezuelan people.
In what form?
In what form? It will be put to them. It will be put to them. And transitional government is not a permanent government. And you know how transitions to democracy are always complicated. Hard choices always have to be made. But again, we look at the 330,000 people the government has murdered with armed gangs. We look at the 18.7 million people on their way to a major famine, 7 million of whom are in imminent danger of dying, and who are in imminent need of humanitarian aid.
So justice can take a back seat.
Is being blocked by this regime who is shooting people for carrying food to their relatives.
I'm not disputing any of that. Are you telling me then that justice takes a back seat?
Transition comes first. Those who come to realize the error of their ways and come to love our people and their country and their constitution will have that credited to them.
Even if they've been in the military.
Government.
Even if they've been in the military. Even if they've ordered crimes.
Well, that is something, yes. As long as we get the regime transferred back, the country transitioned back to democracy.
You don't seem very certain about this.
What do you mean? I am absolutely certain. We need this dictatorship, drug cartel gone, so that my country can feed itself again.
At any price.
They're not a government. They do not govern.
At any price.
They were not elected.
They have the guns.
They have the guns, and we need the guns for territorial control as well. We are also invaded by foreign terrorist organizations that are also bombing our allies and our neighbors. There have been 2 terrorist attacks by the ELN.
And you might well call in the US military. And you might well call in the US military to do the work for you.
There are many militaries who would be happy. The Colombian military has asked for permission to come in and kill the ELN terrorist leaders that are taking that.
You trust Donald Trump?
This is without Donald. Wait a minute. You're mixing.
I'm talking about asking the U.S. military to come in. If the U.S. military happens,
first of all, you clearly have not worked with the military. The U.S. military is not Donald Trump. Second of all, and if you know how the military...
Who's the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military?
Yeah.
He's the commander-in-chief.
He's the commander-in-chief, but the military has a very particular methodology. That's irrelevant.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, of course. I am not here to comment on U.S. politics. I'm here to comment on my country.
You won't comment on the commander-in-chief of the military that you may ask to come
I am not asking anybody. I have not been asked to ask them.
That your movement may ask. And is opening discussions.
I am not commenting on it, no. That is not I am not commenting on it. I am not a representative of the U.S. government. I am a representative of the Guaido government, period. I'm here to discuss my country and the blood on the hands of the Maduro dictatorship, which is actually the world's biggest drug cartel, importing drugs into the UK.
You've said that already. You've said that already. We now know that high-level talks have taken place in Norway.
Yes.
Apparently not direct talks.
Correct.
But mediated by Norway. What's happened in these talks?
Not much is the short answer to that. So what happened?
So they've been totally unproductive.
Yeah, they were totally unproductive. There were an initial outreach. So because the Lima Group, the International Contact Group, and the US, that you love to comment on, were also
well, the ones talking to them, not me.
were aware that and the UN also, again, not a bastion of right-wingness, were aware of these talks, and we sent 2 representatives from the Guaido government. The Maduro side sent 2 representatives. They did not fly together. They did not speak to each other. They did not have breakfast together.
Okay, so you wonder what the point was then?
Each side met with the Norwegian officials to state their position and under what conditions they would negotiate. We stated.
So what's the next step?
So we were very clear, and my president has been very clear, and he has stated it once again online yesterday.
What's the next step?
That we will enter into good faith negotiations that entail an end of the 3-step plan we have laid forward since January.
So you're setting conditions for these talks.
Of course there are conditions
You're setting
to
these
talks.
conditions.
Of course there are conditions to talks. There are conditions to any talk. You buy a house, there are conditions.
It's a little different.
Well, of course, that's right. There are 30 million lives at stake. So, oh yes, if there are conditions for your purchase of a house,
so you're going to lay down
saving 30 million people.
You're going to lay down preconditions which the other side is going to refuse.
No.
How helpful is that?
No. The other side is the one that never met its conditions. The Maduro regime is the one who has said it does not want elections. We are not blocking free and fair elections. The Maduro regime has. And the Maduro regime is the one that has extended talks. In the past, what has happened is when we have had dialogues, and we had the dialogues according to, they chose the place, they chose the timing, they chose the representatives, they kept our political leaders in prison, and we said, free the political prisoners. No, free, and they just carried on, and in the meantime, they have stolen more money and oppressed more people and tortured more people.
Is it a precondition of these talks that Maduro step aside?
Correct. Absolutely.
And what makes you think that they're going to do that for you? What makes you think?
Because they were negotiating to get him out already. There has been a plane on the tarmac twice.
They were playing you. They were playing you.
No, they weren't. They are.
You're convinced they were serious?
Yes, absolutely. I know for a fact they were.
How?
That I cannot disclose on air, but I know for a fact that they have been negotiating actively with us and also with other countries to find a way to take them. There are countries that have said that they will take them. So these talks are quite advanced.
You think you can be a winner that takes all in this? Really?
Take what?
Take all in the negotiations that may actually come to face-to-face.
There is no winner take all when you have 30 million people living under a dictatorship.
You think that they will just bow down and accept all your conditions?
Well, all conditions.
Your key conditions.
No, key conditions are the end of the usurpation, a transitional government, which is to be negotiated, and free and fair elections with proper international observation. I don't see how that's a winner-take-all at all. My country is dying under the gaze of a fractured and conflicted international community that has just watched my people die and be tortured and done nothing about it.
Your international community has given Juan Guaido recognition. He certainly hasn't got it from inside the country.
No, he absolutely does have it from inside the country.
He's had people on the streets. That's not the same thing, is it?
What do you expect then?
People on the streets is power?
People on the streets is love. People on the streets is support. People on the streets is an expression of hope.
And it can come and go.
Hope.
And it can come and go.
For a brighter future.
And it can come and go.
Well,
easily.
It certainly went for Maduro, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Because he won't get out of the way, and he had, he's there under a fraud. He is there as a torturer. He is there as someone who did not win a free and fair election.
He is still there. And right. You're on the outside. And you're on the outside.
Our duty, no, we are not on the outside. We are in the heart of the Venezuelan people. We are in with the legitimacy of all the Western democracies, all the countries that are liberal democracies that have rule of law recognize our Constitution. And they recognize the legitimacy of Juan Guaido. That we are in a situation where a drug cartel has taken all the levers of power. By the way,
doesn't mean you're going to succeed. Any of that, does it? Doesn't mean you're going to succeed.
We will die trying. We have no option but to fight for our people. I will fight for my people until I draw my last breath.
Vanessa Neumann, thanks very much for being on the programme.
Thank you.